The funeral reception was quiet and heavy with sadness. Relatives and neighbors filled the family home in Ohio, speaking softly as the smell of fresh lilies drifted through the rooms. Nora Whitaker stood near the doorway, still trying to accept that her mother, Vivian, was gone. She had driven 6 long hours from Chicago after receiving the news. Her husband, Marcus, and their daughter, Sophie, had stayed behind so she could spend time with her family and say goodbye properly. Nora had hoped that, despite the years of distance, they could put old problems aside for one day. Instead, the moment she arrived, everything fell apart. Her older sister, Brooke, stepped forward and looked directly at her. The room became silent. "You're dead to this family, Nora," Brooke said coldly. "You've been dead for 12 years. Leave now." The words hit Nora like a slap. Several relatives lowered their eyes. Others pretended not to hear. No one spoke up for her. Nora felt her face burn with embarrassment. She wanted to turn around, walk out the door, and never come back. But she had not come for Brooke. She had come for her mother. 12 years earlier, Nora had married Marcus against her family's wishes. They had wanted her to follow their plans and marry someone they approved of. Instead, she chose love. After she eloped with Marcus, arguments divided the family. Calls became rare. Visits stopped. The distance between them grew larger every year. Now those old wounds were open again. That night, Nora stayed in the small guest room at the end of the hallway. Most of the furniture had been removed, leaving only a narrow bed and a small dresser. The room felt cold and empty. As she sat alone, listening to quiet voices downstairs, grief settled heavily in her chest. Her mother was gone, and the family she once knew seemed gone too. Still, Nora decided she would stay for a few more days. No matter how painful it became, she wanted the chance to mourn her mother before saying her final goodbye. The next morning, Nora tried to keep herself busy. Sitting alone in the guest room only made the sadness worse, so she decided to help organize some of her mother's belongings. Boxes were stacked in the hallway, and several closets still needed to be cleaned out. She carried a small box into the dining room and carefully sorted through old photographs, receipts, and notebooks. Every item seemed to hold a memory. Some made her smile. Others made her chest ache. While she worked, Aunt Lydia quietly entered the room. She looked around to make sure nobody else was nearby before speaking. "Your mother wasn't happy about how things turned out," she said softly. Nora looked up. "What do you mean?" Aunt Lydia opened her mouth to continue, but Brooke suddenly appeared in the doorway. "There you are," Brooke snapped. "Digging through everything already?" Nora set down the papers in her hands. "I'm helping clean." "Don't pretend," Brooke said. "Everyone knows why you're here. You're hoping to get money." The accusation stung, but Nora refused to argue. She turned back to the box. Brooke laughed bitterly. "You're wasting your time anyway. Mom made sure you wouldn't get anything." The room fell silent. Nora slowly lifted her eyes. "What are you talking about?" "I convinced her years ago to remove you from the will," Brooke said. "After what you did, you didn't deserve a place in this family." For a moment, Nora couldn't speak. The words felt heavier than she expected. Later that afternoon, she continued sorting through another box that had been pushed into the back of a closet. Hidden beneath a stack of old magazines, she found a sealed envelope. Her name was written across the front in Vivian's handwriting. With trembling fingers, she opened it. Inside was a birthday card. The date showed it had been written years ago. Nora read every word carefully. Her mother had written about missing her, thinking about her every day, and hoping she was happy. Tears filled Nora's eyes. The card had never been mailed. She remembered childhood birthdays when Vivian stayed up late decorating cakes and wrapping gifts. Back then, their home had been full of laughter. Somewhere along the way, those happy memories had been buried beneath years of conflict. Holding the card close, Nora began to wonder how many other things she had never been allowed to see. That evening, the house felt even more uncomfortable. People moved from room to room, speaking in low voices whenever Nora walked past. Nobody seemed willing to talk openly, yet everyone seemed to know something she did not. Nora was standing in the kitchen making coffee when Gavin entered. He looked exhausted. Dark circles hung under his eyes, and he avoided looking directly at her. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. Nora nodded. They stepped onto the back porch where the cool air offered a brief escape from the tension inside. For several moments, Gavin said nothing. Then he finally sighed. "There are things you should know." Nora folded her arms and waited. Gavin rubbed his forehead. "You remember how you used to call Mom every month?" "Of course I do." Most of those calls never reached her. Nora stared at him. "What do you mean?" Gavin looked ashamed. Brooke answered a lot of them. Sometimes she told Mom you never called. Other times she told you Mom didn't want to speak. Nora felt the ground shift beneath her. No. I'm serious, Gavin said. It happened for years. Memories rushed through her mind. The unanswered messages. The missed calls. The birthdays when Vivian never returned her voicemail. Nora had spent years believing her mother had chosen silence. The back door suddenly opened. Brooke stepped outside carrying a glass of water. Nora turned toward her immediately. You blocked my calls? Brooke rolled her eyes. Here we go. Answer me. I did what was necessary, Brooke replied coldly. Nora felt anger rising inside her. You made Mom think I stopped caring? Brooke crossed her arms. You left this family. You made your choice. That doesn't give you the right to lie. Brooke's expression hardened. You were selfish. You embarrassed all of us. The argument quickly grew louder. Nora demanded answers about countless rumors that had followed her for years. Stories claiming she hated her family, looked down on them, and wanted nothing to do with her parents. Brooke never denied spreading them. Instead, she defended every word. When Nora mentioned their father, Brooke became even more stubborn. The conversation ended with both women furious and hurt. Later that night, unable to sleep, Nora searched through more boxes stored in the attic. There she found several more birthday cards hidden inside an old suitcase. Each one carried the same message. Vivian had never forgotten her. Vivian had never stopped loving her. As Nora sat alone reading them, sadness mixed with something new. A quiet anger was beginning to grow. And for the first time, she started wondering how much damage Brooke had truly caused. Before sunrise, Nora quietly left the house. The streets were empty, and a thin layer of morning mist covered the cemetery. She walked slowly between the rows of headstones until she reached her mother's grave. For a long time, she stood there without speaking. The fresh flowers placed beside the stone moved gently in the cool breeze. Looking at Vivian's name brought back memories Nora had tried to forget. She remembered the day she married Marcus. She had been nervous but happy. She believed her family would eventually accept her choice. Instead, everything had fallen apart. She remembered Brooke arguing with relatives, making phone calls, and convincing people that Nora had betrayed the family. Within weeks, family gatherings became uncomfortable. Invitations stopped coming. Conversations turned cold. At the time, Nora thought anger had caused the separation. Now she was beginning to see that something much deeper had happened. After spending nearly an hour at the cemetery, she returned home. The moment she entered the guest room, she froze. Her suitcase was sitting by the door. Several of her clothes had been folded and stuffed inside. Brooke was standing beside the bed. What are you doing? Nora asked. I'm helping you leave, Brooke replied. I never said I was leaving. You've stayed long enough. Nora stared at her sister in disbelief. Before the argument could grow, Aunt Lydia appeared in the hallway and called Nora aside. Once they were alone, she lowered her voice. There is something I never understood, she said. Nora listened carefully. Every year on your birthday, your mother disappeared for a day. She always went alone. She never explained where she was going. Nora felt her heart tighten. Did she ever tell you why? Aunt Lydia shook her head. No. But she always came home emotional. Later that afternoon, Gavin approached Nora in the backyard. He looked uncomfortable. I owe you an apology, he said. Nora waited. I believed Brooke. The words came out slowly. I thought she was telling the truth all these years. When people talked badly about you, I never questioned it. Nora felt tears gathering in her eyes. You never asked me? Gavin lowered his head. No. The answer hurt more than she expected. As the day continued, tensions inside the house exploded again. Voices rose from room to room. Old accusations resurfaced. Family members took sides. Through it all, one thing became painfully clear. For years, Brooke had controlled the story everyone heard about Nora. And little by little, she had succeeded in making Nora disappear from her own family. The next day, Nora spent most of her time alone. She no longer trusted anyone in the house enough to have a normal conversation. Every answer seemed incomplete. Every explanation led to more questions. Late in the afternoon, she entered Vivian's old bedroom again. A desk stood near the window. She had looked through it before, but something about it continued to bother her. One drawer remained locked. After searching for several minutes, she found a small key hidden inside a jewelry box. Her hand shook slightly as she unlocked the drawer. Inside were folders, envelopes, and neatly organized papers. At first, the documents made little sense. They appeared to be financial records, account statements, and handwritten notes. But several pages carried Vivian's signature. Nora sat down and carefully read through them. The more she read, the more confused she became. Some records suggested Vivian had been managing something privately for years without telling the rest of the family. Before Nora could continue, the bedroom door flew open. Brooke stepped inside. The moment she saw the papers, her face changed. "What are you doing?" she demanded. Trying to understand the truth, Brooke stormed across the room. "You have no right to touch those." "No right?" Nora stood up. "I've spent years being lied to." The argument exploded immediately. Neither woman tried to stay calm. Years of pain poured out at once. Brooke accused Nora of abandoning the family. Nora accused Brooke of destroying every chance of reconciliation. Then Brooke shouted something she had never admitted before. "You always got everything." Nora stared at her. "What are you talking about? Mom loved you more. Dad listened to you more. Everyone treated you like you were special." For a moment, Brooke looked less angry and more wounded. The jealousy she had hidden for years was finally visible. After Brooke left, slamming the door behind her, Nora continued searching through the drawer. Near the bottom, she found several old letters. One of them stopped her cold. It described a private meeting between Vivian and Marcus years earlier. Vivian had met him without telling anyone. She had written that Marcus was kind, respectful, and deeply devoted to Nora. Another letter revealed something even worse. Several misunderstandings between mother and daughter had not happened naturally. Someone had interfered. As Nora read the details, Brooke's actions became impossible to ignore. By evening, Nora returned to the guest room and began placing her belongings into her suitcase. She felt exhausted. The house no longer felt connected to her childhood. Yet as she packed, one thought refused to leave her mind. Before she walked away forever, she needed to know the full truth. Nora zipped her suitcase and placed it beside the bed. She had almost made up her mind to leave the next morning. Staying any longer felt pointless. Every room in the house carried another painful discovery, and every conversation seemed to create a new wound. She was reaching for her coat when the sound of the doorbell echoed through the house. A few moments later, voices drifted from downstairs. Curious, Nora stepped into the hallway. Brooke was already at the front door speaking to a man in a dark suit. "We're not interested," Brooke said sharply. The man remained calm. "I'm looking for Nora Whittaker." Brooke immediately blocked the doorway. "She's busy. I need to speak with her personally. Whatever it is, you can tell me." "I'm afraid I cannot." The firm reply caught everyone's attention. Family members slowly emerged from different rooms. Nora walked downstairs. "I'm Nora." The man nodded politely. "My name is Harlan Brooks." Something about his serious expression made the room grow quiet. "I was hoping to speak with you privately." Brooke crossed her arms. "There are no secrets here." Harlan looked directly at Nora. "The matter concerns documents left by your mother." The mention of Vivian instantly changed everything. Within minutes, everyone gathered in the living room. Nobody seemed willing to leave. Harlan opened a leather folder and carefully removed several papers. He placed them on the coffee table. "I worked with Vivian for many years," he began. Nora listened closely. "Shortly after you moved away, she established a private trust account." The room became completely silent. Brooke's face tightened. Harlan continued. "The account remained active for years." Nora frowned. "I don't understand." "Your mother personally managed it. She made regular deposits every year." Several relatives exchanged confused looks. No one appeared to know what he was talking about. Gavin leaned forward. "Every year?" "Yes." Brooke suddenly laughed. "This makes no sense." But her voice lacked confidence. Harlan calmly pointed to the documents. "Everything is fully recorded." Nora stared at the papers. Her mother had secretly maintained something for more than a decade. The realization sent a wave of emotion through her. Across the room, Brooke looked shaken. For years she had insisted Vivian wanted nothing to do with Nora. Now a stranger had arrived carrying proof that Vivian had been planning something in secret. And whatever that secret was, it threatened to destroy the story Brooke had spent years convincing everyone to believe. No one spoke for several seconds after Harlan finished. The silence felt heavy. Then Harlan pulled another document from his folder and placed it beside the others. "This trust became active upon Vivian's passing," he said. "The funds belong solely to Nora." Nora looked at the number printed on the page and felt her breath catch. The amount was far larger than she had expected. Around the room, several relatives stared in disbelief. Brooke immediately shook her head. "No. That's impossible." Harlan ignored the interruption and carefully removed a sealed envelope. Vivian instructed us to deliver this personally. He handed it to Nora. Her hands trembled as she took it. The familiar handwriting on the front made her eyes sting. For a moment she simply stared at it. Then she slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a folded letter. The room remained silent as Nora began reading. The first few lines nearly broke her. Vivian wrote that she had loved her every single day they had been apart. She apologized for not fighting harder when family pressure became overwhelming. She admitted there were times when fear had kept her silent when she should have spoken. Nora paused and wiped away tears. Her voice shook as she continued. Vivian wrote about Marcus. She said she was proud of the life Nora had built and grateful that her daughter had found someone who truly cared for her. She described Marcus as a good husband and a good man. Nora's chest tightened. These were words she had waited years to hear. The letter ended with a simple wish. Vivian hoped that one day Nora would understand that her love had never disappeared, even when circumstances made it seem otherwise. By the time Nora finished reading, tears were running down her face. Across the room, Gavin looked completely stunned. He stared at the floor as if everything he believed had suddenly fallen apart. Brooke reacted differently. This proves nothing, she snapped. Several relatives turned toward her. It could have been manipulated. Someone could have arranged this. Harlan's expression remained calm. The documents have been verified through legal channels. Brooke opened her mouth to argue again but found no support from anyone. The evidence sat plainly on the table. For the first time, Nora no longer felt crazy for questioning the past. The truth had finally entered the room, and it was far stronger than the lies that had kept her away for so many years. The living room remained silent after Brooke's failed attempts to challenge the documents. Nobody seemed interested in defending her anymore. Nora slowly stood from her chair. She looked directly at her sister. For years she had imagined this moment differently. She thought she would be angry, shouting, or demanding answers. Instead, she felt strangely calm. You spent 12 years trying to erase me, Nora said quietly. While Mom spent those same years holding on to me. Brooke looked away. Nora continued. You wanted everyone to believe she stopped loving me. But she never did. The words hung heavily in the room. For the first time, Brooke's confidence disappeared completely. Her eyes filled with tears. I was trying to protect the family, she whispered. No, Nora replied. You were protecting yourself. Brooke shook her head. But the denial did not last long. Years of pressure seemed to collapse all at once. Through tears, she began admitting things she had never admitted before. After their father died, she became terrified of losing control of the family. She wanted everyone close to her. She wanted to be the person everyone depended on. When Nora left, Brooke convinced herself that keeping distance between Nora and the family was the right thing to do. But over time, the lies became easier. The manipulations became routine. And eventually, she no longer knew how to stop. Nobody interrupted her. The room listened in stunned silence. When Brooke finally stopped speaking, Nora walked to her suitcase near the hallway. She opened it and removed the birthday cards she had found. One by one, she placed them on the coffee table. The stack was thick. Years of missed birthdays sat there in plain view. No dramatic speech was needed. The cards spoke for themselves. Each one carried Vivian's handwriting. Each one carried love. Aunt Lydia covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. Gavin stared at the cards without moving. The truth was impossible to avoid now. Nora looked back at Brooke. There was never a competition between us, she said softly. Mom had enough love for both of her daughters. Brooke lowered her head and began crying. No one rushed to comfort her. The house felt smaller than ever. The secrets, lies, and years of damage were finally exposed. And for the first time since Nora arrived, everyone could see exactly who had caused it. The following morning felt different. The tension was still there, but something had changed. The lies that had controlled the family for years were no longer hidden. Everyone knew the truth now, and nobody could pretend otherwise. Harlan returned with the final paperwork. He sat at the dining room table while Nora carefully reviewed each page. She took her time, reading everything before signing her name. When the last document was complete, Harlan placed the papers back into his folder and nodded. Everything is officially transferred, he said. Nora thanked him. The account was now hers, exactly as Vivian had intended. A few relatives watched quietly from across the room. One of them asked whether Nora planned to challenge the rest of the estate. Nora shook her head immediately. I don't want the house. The answer surprised several people. I don't want any arguments about property either, she continued. Mom already gave me what she wanted me to have. For the first time in days, she felt certain about something. The decision brought a sense of peace. Later that afternoon, Gavin found her sitting alone on the back porch. He looked nervous. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then he sat down. "I keep thinking about everything that happened," he said. Nora remained quiet. "I should have listened to you years ago." His voice was filled with regret. "I should have asked questions instead of believing whatever I was told." Nora looked out toward the yard. "You made your choice." "I know." The sadness in his face seemed genuine. "I can't change it." "No," Nora said softly. "You can't." The words hurt both of them. After a long silence, she finally spoke again. "I appreciate your apology." Gavin nodded slowly. It was not forgiveness without limits. It was simply honesty. Some damage could not be erased by a single conversation. As evening approached, family members drifted into separate rooms. Brooke barely spoke. She remained quiet and withdrawn, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Nora did not feel victorious. What she felt was freedom. For years she had carried confusion, guilt, and self-doubt. Now those burdens were gone. She was no longer fighting to prove her place in the family. She finally understood that her mother's love had never depended on anyone else's approval. And that truth was worth far more than any argument she could have won. By late afternoon, the house felt emptier than it had in years. Nora stood in the doorway with her suitcase beside her, taking one last look at the place that had once been filled with childhood noise and family routines. No one tried to stop her this time. She stepped outside and closed the door behind her. The air was cooler than before, carrying the soft orange light of sunset. Her car was parked near the driveway, exactly where she had left it days earlier. She placed her bag in the back seat, sat down, and started the engine. For a moment, she just stayed there, hands resting on the steering wheel. Then she picked up her phone. Marcus answered quickly. "Are you okay?" he asked. Nora paused, then let out a slow breath. "Yes," she said. "I'm coming home." Her voice was steady, but there was something lighter in it now, like a weight had finally been lifted. She called Sophie next. Her daughter's excited voice filled the line, talking about small things from school, unaware of everything that had happened. Nora listened and smiled softly, holding back tears. "I'll be there soon," she said. After ending the call, she drove down the long road that led away from the house. Trees lined both sides, their branches moving gently in the wind. With every mile, the silence in her chest felt less heavy. On the way, she made one final stop. The cemetery was quiet, just as she had left it. She walked slowly to Vivian's grave and knelt down. The sky was turning deep orange above her. "I understand now," Nora whispered. "Everything you tried to do." Her fingers touched the cold stone. "You never stopped loving me." She stayed there for a few moments, letting the words settle inside her. When she finally stood, her eyes were dry, but her heart felt clear. She walked back to her car without looking back. As she drove away, she thought about everything she had learned. Family was not always about who stood beside you. Sometimes it was about who never stopped caring, even when distance and silence tried to erase it. Pain had shaped her, but it would not define her anymore. The past still existed, but it no longer had control over her future. Ahead of her was Marcus, Sophie, and a life she would rebuild on her own terms. The road stretched forward under the fading light, and for the first time in a long while, Nora did not feel lost in it. She felt free.